Well, hey everybody, welcome back to So You Want to Be in Ministry. I'm Tim, and I am excited about this interview today. Obviously, took a few weeks off, needed it during the holiday season. If you're in ministry, you know what I'm talking about. But I am glad to be back and ready to go in our third year of this podcast. So we've made it to year 3. It's exciting. I'm excited about what this year could bring within this podcast. But today we get to talk to The Purpose Live. And it's Jason and Skylar. They are the founders of The Purpose Live. They help with production. And so whether you need coaching, whether you need consulting, they want to help you find purpose in why you're doing the production element that you're doing. And so they have incredible stuff on their website. They have free resources. You can see all their contact stuff. You can see who they've been partnered with. And that's how I actually connected with them, is they were running production for a tour and some musical groups that came to our church. And I just saw how they worked behind the scenes, and they were phenomenal. They have incredible hearts. Like, I think you can pick that out pretty early if you're on the road and you're traveling and you're trying to deal with a lot of different things that can be very stressful. And they had some things that weren't working just right, and they needed to, like, he had to rebuild part of one of the instrument set pieces. And great hearts, great attitude the entire time, to the point where I'm like, hey man, can we connect, and maybe I can bring you on the podcast, because I wanted to share with you, because we are all about honoring faithfulness in ministry, and that's what I saw in front of me. So enough of me talking. Let's get into talk to The Purpose Live, Jason and Skylar. Here they are. Well, hey, Jason and Skylar, so good to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so we got I got the unique opportunity to meet you guys as you were traveling with Sanctus Real. Got my sweatshirt on today.
Nice.
Got to rep them. So it was cool to get to meet you guys and just see what you did behind the scenes. And we'll talk about that as we get into kind of what you're doing within the ministry field. But give me the background. How did you even get to The Purpose Live and starting this production and connecting with this layer of ministry?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, I think for me personally, both of us, we grew up in music ministry most of our life. Skylar started singing at a very young age. I started playing drums when I was 4 years old, playing in church at 11. And really, that was the only desire of my heart. I remember being in my parents' basement playing drums, and just wanting really just two things in life: to be a part of a genuine music ministry, and, to have the tour bus, the production, the great live show, and travel doing music full time in that capacity. And I started touring right out of high school. But even before then, I was playing in a small regional band with my sister and a couple friends. And I remember this show very vividly. I was 16 years old, and I was actually playing with a broken hip. I suffered a hip injury, my junior year of high school playing soccer. And this point, I was just learning how to twirl my drumsticks while playing. And I remember we had videoed this particular concert we played. I remember watching the video back, and I'm twirling my drumsticks. Like, I would give a little head bob and I'll sit straight up, but I was very, very expressionless, very just stoic in pose. And I'm like, watching that back, I'm like, wow, I know I'm having a good time, but it doesn't look at all like I'm having a good time. And so that was, in me, ignited this. It was just like this flip switched overnight, to where I was like, okay, how do I better myself to perform better? How do I express myself from the drum set and, and show that I'm enjoying and love what I do? And so it just kind of put me on this journey, right? And, I grew up going to concerts all my life with my parents, whether like Winter Jam or Rock and Worship Roadshow was going through, or any kind of tour. We had a local Christian radio station that had pretty much every tour come through. And so we grew up going to shows, and I'd find myself like critiquing and analyzing performances and not really knowing why. But I was always just fascinated by live performances and the connection you can have with your audience through that. And shortly after graduating high school, my graduation gift from my family, extended family, and church people had seen me drumming since I was this little kid, all gave for me to go to Nashville, Tennessee, to this music camp for a week. I went there for drumming, but there was a main session class that there was a live music producer or performance producer, and he worked with the college campus worship band, just working on their worship songs. and breaking them down and arranging the song to make it fit for live, worked on their talking points, their transitions, doing everything very intentionally. And it was just like a big aha moment for me, to where I was like, man, everything I've witnessed all my life now gave me words to what I was witnessing. And I remember coming home from camp and I told my parents, I'm like, if I ever stop drumming one day, I want to do that. And so that was kind of just set me on this path. And Skylar was actually my first client, I guess you could say. We began dating.
I was the guinea pig.
She was the guinea pig. And she was just a singer-songwriter, but then kind of
What's
went
funny
more
is
pop.
I was not a super willing guinea pig either.
Yeah.
Like the flip side to this story is I grew up not going to concerts. And the concerts I did go to were few and far in between, but also, which is kind of a nod to the fact that now I run audio, but I remember telling my mom after concerts that I'm like, I'd rather sit in the car because it sounds better on my iPod, like to listen to it that way. So it was kind of funny because we were a little polar opposite as far as concerts came. So when he started sharing about some of the stuff and, hey, let me help you with like some videos and some intros to your songs and things, I was kind of like, okay, but I don't want it to come across as like, I just was very, my understanding of the purpose of it was very limited. So I was the first guinea pig, but I was a little skeptical.
It helped me a lot, though. She was very skeptical, which helped me. Yeah. And then like I had questioned myself because I'm like, okay, as I branch out to start partnering with other artists, I'm like, can I do it again? Was I a one-hit wonder? Like, will this actually work and make a difference in people? So she had always been that very like kind of reining me in, the devil's advocate of like looking on the artist side of like, well, you tell me to do that. Why would I do that? You know,
I feel like you have to be so careful sometimes because as a writer, your song can be your baby. So how much can you tell someone to modify something that they hold so dear, you know?
So I think this, like, the idea of Purpose Live really had been establishing and working in me and doing its work in me my whole life. Yeah. But it didn't come to fruition until I've now been doing the work with starting out with Skylar back in the day for about 10 years now. But Purpose Live itself is just 2 years old. And we established that like once we moved out here to Tennessee. And, you know, that's really where Skylar felt like God downloaded the name for her.
Yeah.
I think it fits, yeah.
Thank you. Well, so we had, when we moved out here, he had, like you said, he had been doing the work previously. So, you know, the hands-on stuff, what should we do with your song? How do we make a message translate? And he had actually brought it under a production company that we were currently working for. Okay. So it had a name under the production company and it had kind of a packaging. And so since we were moving out to Tennessee, we, in a wonderful way, we were splitting from them in that way. So then now we have this thing where we know what we're doing, but we have no idea what it's called. There is no brand. What's the point? What's the mission? What's the, you know, so when we moved to Nashville, both of us were kind of praying about it a lot and being like, God, what do you want us to call it? What is its mission and what do you want us to do with it? Like, how best can we steward this thing? And we went to our first writers round. I don't know if you've ever been to a writers round. Do you know what those are?
We have some people on our staff, some of our worship people that have gone to some of those, but I have not been to one.
Oh, we lost you. I can't hear you.
Did you lose all of it? Am I back?
There we go. Yep, got you. Okay, so you have some people on your staff?
Yeah, we have some people on our staff that have been to the writers' rounds and things. We've even had some that have gone to a conference where that was the specific focus of the conference was learning how to write music and then getting into groups and helping each other write something that weekend. Yeah. Okay. But I have not really personally been there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we were coming home from our first one. We were visiting actually a client and friend of ours. We went to his since we had a lot of time on our hands. And as we were driving home, I felt like God kind of dropped it in my lap. I was like, what if we call it Purpose Live? Does that sound weird? You know, so then we're like testing it. We're like, does it roll off the tongue? Does it? So we kind of had the name and, but that whole next year, so the whole year of 2023, I started feeling like was teaching us why God gave us that name. As we were going out on the road with some people in various different formats that we had actually never been out in. We hadn't gone out on the road like we were that year. And so kind of being a lot more tied into the actual music industry, meeting a lot more people that are tied into the music industry, it just was kind of revealing to us slowly, like there is a lot of missing purpose behind the driving force of people's artistry or ministry or whatever it is. And so we were trying to learn how can we be kind of a vessel that fills the gaps where people have, even if it's just you've forgotten your purpose. When you start out, right, you're passionate about like, oh, I want to play guitar. So then you learn, and then you're excited because you learned how to play guitar. Then you want to move to Nashville. So you move to Nashville, and it's like all this excitement. You get on a record label, you write these songs, you release these songs. And then, a few years go by, and all of a sudden now you just need to make it. You just need to, we've heard a lot of people say, as long as I can just make it like paycheck to paycheck, I'm fine. Like I'm good if that's all I can do. And one side of that is like completely understandable, but also we want to help kind of reignite, like, why did you start in the first place? Where's the purpose behind it? And so it kind of just overflows into both of our lives in a lot of different areas. Like even I was on a bit of a health journey starting 2021. I've kind of been on a health journey for a long time, but started doing a lot of research. And so it even spills over into our personal lives in that way too, is where we want to do everything with purpose, whether you eat or you drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. And so I feel really blessed that the Lord gave us a name that feels so purposeful in all the areas of our lives. So it's kind of fun.
So walk me through, how do you help you do more than just like musical artists from what I've seen. So whatever areas, you can talk about those different areas, but how do you help somebody like before and through the process and even after? How do you help them reignite back to that purpose? Or maybe somebody that was just talented, didn't really have a purpose, they're just super talented. How do you help them find that purpose?
Wow.
Absolutely. I mean, we actually talk about this a lot, that talent can only take you so far.
Yeah.
You may have an amazing gift, an amazing voice, but if that's all you have, that's all you have. Like performing live for people, it's not about you. Yeah. I always ask artists, especially or even worship teams, like, are you on stage, are you performing selfishly or are you performing selflessly? So like selfishly, we're thinking, man, okay, maybe you're a little under the weather, you're a vocalist, and so you're struggling vocally tonight. So that's in your head, you're thinking about that. You can't hear as well on the monitors and it's all about you. Instead of like, well, no, I'm here to minister to these people. I need to focus on them. And they're not paying attention to the little frog in your throat. You have, you're a little under the weather today. That's not what they're seeing. And that's not what they're grasping, how they're receiving communication. We're so focused on playing our parts perfectly instead of rather performing our role. We each have a role to play, no matter where you are in the band, performing our role purposefully. And so we partner with artists. That's how it mainly started, with artists. And we've partnered with church worship teams as well. We focus on 3 primary areas: pre-show, show day, and post-show. So pre-show covers a wide range. Some days where artists are sending us their backing tracks. We even had a church worship team send their backing tracks, and we'll build arrangements for them. Because there's a big difference between songs that were written and recorded for, an album or, studio for streaming platforms. You have the same format of intro, verse, chorus, bridge, outro, right? And packaged into 3.5 minutes. You have to have a short intro so you can get into your verse, so you can get into your chorus to hook the listener before, maybe if they're listening on radio, before they change the station, or if they're listening on a streaming platform before they skip the song, right? But live is complete opposite. Like before you get into the heart and content meat of your song, is the audience actually with you to grasp it? So like extending intros, expounding upon things, leading them in a way to where by the time you get there, they're with you and ready to receive it. So we'll work on their music, their arrangements. Some days we'll be working in-person rehearsals with people. Other days we're working even remotely, such as this, talking through all their set list flow, building their set list, working on their talking points, transitions, putting together everything we do on stage, how can we do this to the best of our abilities with purpose. So that's kind of like the pre-show prep. We advance shows for people, so we partner with you on that.
Yeah.
When St. Disrael came in, as mentioned, so like calling ahead, advancing shows, setting them up for success when they get there. Some days we're drawing up their stage plots, writers, everything you get. So the paperwork that you receive, we're drawing that up for them so it's ready and professional for them to help set them up for success. So there's a wide range pre-show. Show day will come, people invite us in to speak at different like music camps, conferences. The church worship teams has had us in for like a worship retreat where we'll come in and share, and then like hands-on workshop with the worship team. We still provide some tour support to this day as we're out on the road, performing ourselves or running audio, tour managing, production managing. And then post-show is all review. We'll do show reviews where we get on, they'll video their performance, their rehearsal, we'll get on a call like this and we'll review it, break it down. How can we get better and improve? This went well, this we can improve on, and like we just keep getting better each and every day.
Yeah. But I also feel like, if you're talking about how does that help reignite the passion in people, right? That's the stuff that really helps with the stage translation of your heart and your message. But the other thing that we always talk about with people is like, who are you as a person? Because who you are as a person matters so much more than what you do on the stage. And that's part of where, like, if you have a really awesome voice, but you have no message and you don't really care to be on stage, that might get you far with one song, but then what happens after that? It's just kind of falls flat. And so in the process of us, figuring out what our message is and who we are as Purpose Live and what the Lord wants us to be doing, we have found out that that's exactly what a lot of these artists need as well, is like sometimes you just have to be reminded, what was your purpose? What got you started? Why were you passionate about it? Why does it matter? Why is it something you want to tell people about? You have to remember those things, because then all of the pre-show, show day, post-show stuff matters. All of it feels purposeful because now you're becoming someone better, right? We talk about we need to learn how to become the person who can be the great performer. It starts with who you are. And that has to be anchored in something. And, for us and for a lot of churches, for a lot of Christian believers, right, you have to be anchored in who you are in Christ, most importantly, and then how that extends into your artistry and into your relationships and into the relationship you want to have with your audience. So I would say that's what we really kind of try to hone in on. Like, that's kind of the secret, the underlying message that we talk to people about, that it's the biggest part for us too. So.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because then when you're reconnecting with who you really are and who you really are in Christ, you start working where the performance on stage becomes an overflowing of what's already happening inside, versus like you're trying to dig deep and just find something.
Right.
It's almost like you're bottled up and ready to go. Like, let me get out there. It definitely lands different. I agree with that.
Yeah. I had a youth pastor a long time ago, and some of it's personality type, but he was the personality who, like, if you weren't in youth group, I was too young to be in youth group, you wanted to be, because he just like, he was the guy who he's going to talk and then he's just going to bubble over. And so even if the students don't fully grasp the message, they love Jesus because he loves Jesus, right? Yep. It's that bubbly. So exactly to your point. Yeah. It's, if you're filled up and if you have a solid, firm belief in who you are and who the Lord is in your life, then you can't help but overflow into other people. And that should be the point, right? That should be when we're talking about ministry. For us, that's a lot of what we talk about, especially because sometimes we're going out on the road, not as an artist, right? So we're going out behind the scenes, but it still is such an incredible ministry opportunity. And for us, if we come in filled up as well, we can overflow into the people when we meet the pastor, when I meet the audio guy, when we're working with the guy who's going to help us with the stage or help us get the video working, or the merch volunteers. Like, those tend to be the people that really either end up impacting our lives or we're able to kind of pour into a lot too. Those are the people we can spill over into.
Yeah, I'll speak just personal experience with that. That happened here. I mean, maybe, I don't know if it happens every day. It definitely happened here the entire time you guys were here. You could feel it from the artists. You could feel it from you guys. You could feel it from the moment you were setting things up and we all showed up to help, load everything off, to loading it all back on. I never once was like, oh, okay, like we need to give him a little space right now. Like the entire time, I felt like, in fact, I felt
That's good.
yeah, I felt like there was a time where, like one of my supervisors even called me like, how's it going? I was like, we keep asking each other if we need anything. Like, like we're both asking each other that. So it was just kind of a cool thing where we got to build a small relationship in that couple of hours, you know? So I would say that I saw that come through. And on the concert level, I mean, if you want to speak to this, you can, but just, I don't know how much you got to speak into everything that they did, but it landed where like we left that place and I was like, we just had a moment with God, everybody. It was so obvious. Like it was so obvious. So I was like, whoever's here second has big shoes to fill, because that was the first concert we had. Just if anybody doesn't know, that was the first concert we had in our church, and I was like, good luck getting to this.
Wow.
So.
Oh my goodness. Awesome. Praise the Lord. Yeah. And that's kind of the impression you want to leave, but also that's not the impression that we were able to. Like there is nothing we were able to do to leave that impression beyond us making sure that our hearts were right with the Lord, right? That's why it's important, is because the other thing we used to talk about a lot with the band that he was in, and the one that I started running sound for, that was kind of my origin audio story. But what we would talk about a lot as a group is that we need to not be going out trying to change other people, right? What was it they would say?
They'd say that we're not going out to change the world because we can't. Only God can. So we're going out there to change ourselves, and through our own transformation, we're naturally going to be a blessing and an overflow to pour out to others, and they will naturally be drawn to that and impacted. And that was so true. And so we, to this day, live it out. And like as Skylar was mentioning, and I'm glad it's awesome that you got to witness that too, because some of our most powerful places of ministry while traveling isn't during the concert. You know, we have 60, 90 minutes, you know, of sharing music and worship and whatever that setting may be. But we have 3 or 4 hours of loading in and setting up with people. We have an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours of tear down and load out, into where those one-on-one conversations with people has really, as Skylar mentioned, impacted our lives. And it's been a blessing, impacted them just being there. You know, hey, what's your story? As we're rolling cables and things like that, has been some of the biggest blessings for us. So ministry happens all around. And that's what we want to try to teach our artists as well that we partner with. It's not about the fans entirely. I mean, it is, but it's not all about the crazy fans. It's how about the guy working security who's been sitting there backstage for you all day?
Or the hospitality team.
Hospitality crew cooking, you know, cleaning every meal. And
waiting for you to leave so they can clean up, right? Like they spend a lot of energy and time on stuff for you.
And that's their ministry, and they love it. And we love that as well.
Hey, there's the kitty cat.
There she is.
We were talking about her. And here she is.
I'll put her down. Here she is. Say hi. Bye.
What's her name?
Her name's Prim.
Okay. Prim. Hey, that's a good name.
Thanks.
Well, anything else about pre-show, show day, and then post-show? I want to make sure we covered all of that.
No, I don't think so. Anything really?
All right.
I don't think so, other than it's fun.
It was fun for the day I got to do it. I like mixing things up, so it was fun just being a part of it on the sides. So a lot of pastors are gonna, they're gonna have their 75 to 100 people in their church. They might be the only person on staff. Maybe they have like a part-time secretary. Maybe they have a volunteer church leader or something, volunteer production person. Can you give like 2 or 3 just simple things that any pastor or volunteer production worship person could just check off the list to make sure their performance time in worship just goes up another notch to help? So if they have people that don't know Jesus that comes in, at least the worship is not the distraction. The production is not the distraction. It's like, wow, that sounds really good, and it actually draws them in. Do you have maybe 2 or 3 things for that?
I think foundationally where we come from, where our hearts come from, what we teach, Romans 12:1, offering our bodies a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to the Lord. This is our reasonable act of worship. To where the lights, the video is all great. We love production. I mean, growing up, to backtrack a little bit, Skylar and I, we grew up in churches that were small, maybe 100, 200 people. We didn't have any sort of production to where it was lights up, the sanctuary house lights, white static lights for the front wash. That's all you had. Yep. And then with my previous band, we traveled with all of our own production, had a great show. You know, we would do worship at campus, and we had the great production, and it was awesome. And now we enjoy that aspect of churches, but it has to be done well, right? Because it could be a distraction. So what we talk about, production, lighting, video, should only be an enhancement of what you're doing, not a replacement or not a crutch, if you will. So one of the biggest things, I remember we stepped foot in the church not too long ago visiting, and they had a massive LED wall in the back. They had LED wall strips. And I look up at the ceiling and I see all this lighting, and I counted 24 of just one style of light, and they probably had 5 or 6 different fixtures. And I read over the sky, I'm like, you know, all this is probably to make up for the lack of what they're doing themselves on the platform. And we reference this song a lot, but they come out starting to sing There's Joy in the House of the Lord, Phil Wickham, right? Great song. But it's more like we're at a funeral than a celebration, because everyone's singing There's Joy in the House of the Lord.
And you're like, but is there?
Is there? I'm like, you know, like the kid song, you know, if you're happy and you know it, you know, then your face, clap your hands, you know, then the other verse, your face will surely show it. So like, I'm like, man, how are we singing about there's joy in the house of the Lord? And there's a, you know, there's unbelievers walking through the doors, and they're like, okay, this isn't, what you're saying isn't matching up. Yeah. So like for us, beyond any added production is like working yourselves, you know, and I know some smaller churches maybe are all volunteer based. We're going in just a few months. A church is having us out in Virginia to do like a little worship retreat with their team. We'll come in, we'll you know, speak for a little while, and then we'll put it into practice. And they're like, man, we're an all volunteer based church, so how do we like level up? I'm like, man, we all have something to offer. Yep. We all have our, what is it, you know, 5 loaves and 2 fish, or 2 loaves and 5 fish. You know, our, we all have something we can offer, and we just come and give our best, then God will take care of the rest. Like, so that's what we want to work on foundationally. Like, production stuff is great, but if it's not even done well, so then to go to that church who had the massive LED wall and all the lights, I'm like, man, something is just so weird. And then I realized, okay, so no one on the platform is moving and like in leading in an engaging worship manner, but I'm like, nothing's moving.
Nothing is.
The whole video wall is just a static background of trees, and that became then distracting because it's just like this massive thing that's just a static image. The lighting was just color changes, was static. And I'm like, there's no life to anything. You know, so.
Well, so then too, it's like, it becomes, we want to encourage people not to be wasting resources either, you know. So if you are, you know, whether that's the resource of your time or the resource of your money, right? If you just want to put in a big LED wall, get lighting and do all these fancy things, except you don't need it to that caliber yet, and you don't have people who know how to run it, or it's not going to be used to the best of its ability, there's a better place to put your money, because that's not going to get Jesus to anyone, right? So even with that, like, you can do all the fancy lights, but like, don't waste it. And that's again where, like, to me, purpose comes in, right? Intention. So if you're going to spend money on lights, spend money on lights well, and make sure someone knows how to run them and use them well, right? If you're going to spend money on LED walls, same thing. If you're going to put time and effort into people and volunteers, do it well. One thing we were talking about is my home church. I love them to death, but you can tend to walk into the church, be a part of the service, and walk out and not talk to anybody. And
it's
that
not like
could
it's
be
a big church.
Right, it's not a big church. That could be our problem or their problem or whatever it is, but you can walk in and out, right? Then there's a few churches that we've been to where every single time you turn a corner, there is someone that says, welcome, hi, welcome, welcome, welcome at every single door all the way in. And that's a little much, right?
Yeah.
And so he was at a church, one of the church growing up where
my church growing up, the philosophy was you come once, you're a guest, you come twice, you're family. So it was very welcoming. You know.
Yeah, they had people to welcome people in, but it felt very genuine. And so I think that that's where it's like, right, when you're talking about the heart, why you're doing something, the intention behind it, it comes through. So if you're just putting a bunch of people everywhere to make sure people feel welcomed, like I'm a fan of being at a church service, but I was like, oh my goodness, I'm welcomed, thank you, or you have
my seat, please.
Exactly. And sometimes it can feel ingenuine if you walk in and people are like, oh, it's so good to see you, and I'm like, I've never been here. You haven't seen me before, right? So it's all about like, how can we come across the most genuine, the most honest and truthful, because that is the thing that impacts people. So even if you are an artist and we're trying to relearn our purpose, like how people, your audience are always going to know if you're being genuine or not, because they can sense that. They can tell. Your energy does not lie, right? And so it's the same thing, I think, as a pastor within ministry. It's the same thing behind the scenes. It's the same thing in front of people. If you know who you are and you actually put intention behind the things that you do, it'll always come across genuine. And maybe you don't do things perfect every time, and maybe there's always going to be ways to improve. But if there's always intention, I feel like everything will always line up, and God will always be able to flow smoothly however he needs to flow, right? Because you're trying your best and being intentional to be exactly who you're supposed to be right now.
I like that. So what are the one intentional thing that you shared was just make sure your heart's ready to go. You're ready to be a living sacrifice. Would you give?
Those cats.
Yeah,
sorry.
Cat falling off. That's okay. What could you give like one or two other things that coming into a weekend service you could just be intentional about to make sure that you've paved the way for the Holy Spirit to do his thing?
Yeah, I think one, it's similar to just preparation, similar to the pastor. So like I grew up going to church all my life, grew up in a Christian school, I've heard many sermons, and I could probably count on one hand how many times I've seen pastor get up and be like, well, I had a sermon prepared, but God spoke to me during worship and chucks the notes and just goes for it, right? But that's happened like this many times in all the many sermons I've witnessed.
And those are great.
And those are great.
Yeah.
And God works powerfully in those, right? But, the same is true for preparation and worship. The same is true, like in preparation, what are we going to share about? What has God put on your heart? And so I think sometimes we can easily kind of put off a lack of preparation on reliance on the Holy Spirit in there, but it's a balance, right? We want to have a proper balance. And so like when pastor's preparing a sermon on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or whatever, God's working on his heart, preparing his message. Is God any less on Sunday because he prepared? No. So like, why is there, well, okay, here's our songs we're going to do. And that's all the preparation. We'll just run through the song Sunday morning. And that's all we get versus like, well, no, are we actually intentionally, how are we going to lead the congregation this weekend? What do we want to do here? And there's a church we started visiting when we moved to Nashville. And I, for one, both of us really, as Skylar mentioned, she got tricked into worshiping the first time she ever visited this church because they just did it well, right?
Yeah.
They ushered you into this place.
And I say that because we are live performance people, right?
It's hard to turn it off.
It's hard to go into a church service and not see all the things. And that's why I phrased it that way when I was talking to him. I went to this one and I was like, they tricked me because I was gone. I was lost. I couldn't see anything anymore. I wasn't thinking about the song. Anyway, sorry.
But then we want to be intentional, right? So when we've gone to this church, I was one that I've never been really a crier, but I would always get moved in worship to where I can be free, right?
Yeah.
And just worship the Lord. And, I would find myself crying. I'm like, okay, third song in, cried. Now I'm ready. Let's get into the word. I'm ready. But then I do two more songs. So that like one negative thing I would say is like, man, I feel like worship is just too long. But then once I pulled back, then put on the whole performance producer hat again, I was like, no, actually they're doing this very well. Because you don't leave them in this valley to where people are crying and, have had this experience with the Lord. You don't just leave them there and then, okay, move on and let's crack open our Bibles. And no, they bring you back out of that valley and bring in now we're just worshiping and praising God. So I'm like, once you witness that, it's like, wow, it's done very well. What
they're doing is stewarding the job as a leader of worship, right? Because I think it's easy to get on stage and think of this as I'm singing this Sunday or I'm playing this Sunday. But what you're doing is you are put into a leadership position over the congregation. And that's not a bad thing, right? And so, but it needs to be taken seriously. And so in order to be a good leader, right, there are plans you have to put in place. And the whole reason, like one of the reasons why I was a skeptic is because I was like, well, but if I plan it out and do all these crazy things that it feels so constricting to think about planning it like that. I feel like I can't be myself, or I feel like I can't let the Spirit move. But when you give yourself a roadmap and kind of like, I want to start here, here's the options in the middle, here's my heart and the message I know I want to talk about, and here's the ending, and you structure it and prepare it and be intentional about it, you now have the freedom to do whatever you need to do whenever the Spirit moves, because you know exactly how to get where you're going. You know exactly what's coming up next. You know exactly how to alter it, right? And so it actually provides you way more freedom. It provides you way more freedom as a worship leader to be able to go into Sunday service saying, this is important to me to steward these people's heart well. It's about these people coming in and needing to be ushered into the presence of God. So how can I do that well? When you think about it like that, you have to prepare, you know, because now you're thinking.
Yeah, so two things that we have done that I've used is just to describe this to individuals when I talk to other people. One is we believe the Holy Spirit is also omniscient and omnipresent. And so when you're in the preparation, if you include him, he knows what's going to happen. We don't. And so you can prepare with him. And then when he does what he does in the moment, he actually was part of the preparation to take you there.
Wow. That's so good.
Yeah. So like we often think that he's just in the moment, but he was back in the preparation too. And so we try to remember that. And then I've heard our worship director, Travis, say this. I'm going to do my best. I may mess it up a little bit, but he talks about in the preparation, he said, we're trying to create a hallway with doors, and every door takes you to a transcendent moment with God. We don't know which one those people are going to go through, but we want to line the hall. We want to prepare and line the hall with doors to give them an opportunity to experience that at some point. So maybe they missed the last door, and but then they're like, oh, okay, I missed it. I should have done it, but now I've got another one. I'll do it now. And so then we just try to line the hallway with doors for those moments.
That is so cool. I love that analogy. Yeah. That's amazing.
He did a great. I had never heard him say that before, but he told me that one time. I'm like, I hope we use that a lot. He goes, oh yeah, we say that all the time. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to start using that now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Lots of opportunities, right? Yeah, lots of opportunities for people to meet the Lord or to have their needs met, you know? And I feel like that goes from worship service into even just people doing concerts too, right? It's kind of all about how do you leave people encouraged no matter what your message is. And so leaving them multiple doors the whole way is just a great analogy, because there's so many opportunities for you to feel hope, to feel mended, to feel like you're seen, to feel like you're heard, you know, to feel like Jesus sees you. And wow, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, feel free to take it, borrow it, use it. We all our stuff is for the kingdom. We don't care. So
I love that. That's so cool.
Tell everybody where they can find you, because you may have pastors out there, worship leaders, whatever, that are just like, hey, how do I get in touch with them to come check us out or take us through a worship weekend or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can find us on all social media at The Purpose Live, and then our website, thepurposelive.com. Okay. We would absolutely love to connect with you, and just honestly, you can sign up on our website for a free consultation to where we'll do this. We'll hop on a call together, get to know you, your heart, where you are, and your particular music journey, your music ministry, whether it's your church or as an artist, singer, whatever that looks like, and how we best can come alongside you and help take you to that next level, whatever that may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have like some free templates on there too that I saw. And so they have resources for you. You can go there and check it all out. Even a little, it might give you a little bit of a nudge in the right direction. So make sure you're checking them out.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, we actually are finishing up another one right now where we are working on a book that we're hoping to release in the new year, at the top of the year.
Yeah.
That is a set list guide, how to craft the perfect set list. I actually sent it to my mom. My mom does worship team stuff back at my home church. And she was saying too that it's like it gets you excited to like go and plan the next worship service and stuff like that. And so we wrote it in a context for both artists, musicians, and worship services, because they kind of all have kind of like a valley and ebb and flow thing. And so, but we're really excited about that. That'll be coming out soon, and hopefully that can be really helpful for anyone who needs it. So
check it out. Yeah, absolutely check it out.
Yeah.
So I usually I didn't give you this question, but I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but I usually leave with there are people in ministry right now that are just walking through some discouragement. They may be even on the verge of just like, I think I just need to quit. Like, I'm just done. And they need a little shot of encouragement and maybe reconnecting with their purpose. Would you have anything to say to anyone that is out there that is in that moment, in that season of life?
What's that story of the one guy in Australia or something? I'm gonna butcher the story.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's,
I know. So
do you know?
my brother-in-law is a pastor of a small church back in Ohio where I grew up, and he would share this story. This man in Sydney, Australia, ended up coming to Christ, and he promised the Lord every day that he'll stand there and pass out tracts on George Street where he lived, and every day he would just hand out tracts to people that God laid on his heart to minister to. And as then there was a church pastor who would have missionaries in, different pastors in, and he would always ask them, "What is your testimony? How did you come to know Christ?" And it was, different. They all had different stories. Whether one was like, "Oh, I was on a business trip in Sydney, Australia, and there was this little white old haired man on Gray Street or on George Street who gave me this tract." And that's fascinating. So then he'd have a missionary come in. "Oh, I was vacationing one year with a family in Sydney, Australia, and there was this little old white-haired man on George Street who gave me a tract." And story after story. And this pastor's like, "Man, I gotta go to Sydney, Australia, and meet this guy, because all these missionaries, all these pastors had the same story." And so he goes and he's like, man, he's looking for this older gentleman on George Street. And so he asks around. People's like, "Oh, actually, here's his home." And the guy's on his deathbed, and this pastor goes and introduces himself. "Hey, who I am, and I just got to tell you, because of your faithfulness, there are so many missionaries, so many pastors who all had the same story of receiving a tract from you that they would never have come to know Christ." And just tears start pouring down his face. And he's like, "I had promised the Lord that every day I will hand out a tract. I'll be faithful in just the little things and just do what I can do." Right. And he goes, "But not one person I ever saw come to know Christ." And so we can work sometimes so hard, and we can just kind of be on this hamster wheel to where we're spinning our wheels, right? We're going and going, but we're not going anywhere to our knowledge, or for what we can see. But there's something always at work that is way bigger than any of us. And God is at work in any of us. And if we allow us to go through that process, right? If we want to be refined, sometimes it's trial by fire, to where we have to go through it. But a lot of times we can get burnt out so easy and become discouraged and give up. But we're so close to our breakthrough that if we just keep going through it, we'll see the other side. We're going to be way better off for it. And God's got a plan through it all. Think about Joseph. He was sold by his brothers, thrown into a pit. Then he's, hired as a slave, and then he's thrown in prison, falsely accused. He had to go through all of those things to get where his destiny was, where God had appointed him. And if he didn't go through all that, would he have gotten where he was supposed to be? And then his dream fulfilled to where his family, everyone is essentially worshiping him, thanking him for they provided, through him and what God had for his life. So there's another side of that breakthrough that if we just push through and continue being faithful in the little things, God will see us through it.
Yeah, and I think just one more thing I would add on to that is that sometimes we get burnout because we're working so hard to serve God. But I think we forget that what we do with our life and what we do with our mind, what we do with our world needs to just be pleasing to God. It doesn't need to be, "Okay, God, I did this for you, I did this for you, I did this for you," right? We don't need to be tacking up a list of accomplishments for him, right? The 2 goals in life is, we hear this from a guy we actually listen to on YouTube a lot. He talks about how we need to be serving God's people, and pleasing God. Those are the 2 jobs, and so sometimes it's easy to get burnt out because maybe you feel like he's quiet, or the other thing is you have to tune into the Holy Spirit to know when you are burnt out and when God is shifting things in your life, right? So listen close, but just remember that what you're doing, like Jason said, has a purpose, even if you don't see the other side of it. So stick close next to God, and he'll lead you, whether it's away from what you're doing or deeper into what you're doing. And yeah, I think exactly what you were saying, and what we've been talking about. Like, if you know who you are, just you and the Lord, just kind of come back to that, because that gives everything else in your life purpose.
I love that. That's a good way to get back to your purpose. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'll be the corny pun. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for being here. This is a great conversation. I'm so appreciative of the ministry you guys are doing, and the connection that we've been able to have to get to this point. So thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been so fun.
Yeah, you're welcome, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yes, let's do it.
I think you can see what I meant there. Just phenomenal hearts. Please get on there, engage with them. You can engage on social media. You can engage on their website, thepurposelife.com. I'll put all the links in our social media and the YouTube descriptions and things, so please check them out. They are well worth checking out and engaging with, even if you don't have something. But if you are a church or an organization that would like them to coach and consult on your audio, on your production level stuff, so whether that's worship ministries in a church, maybe you just run a conference and you just want some fresh eyes to maybe elevate things or find more purpose in things, check them out. They would be well worth looking into, to give a couple extra set of eyes to just enhance what's already happening in your world. Thank you so much for engaging with this episode. Super excited about the next several here this year. So make sure you come back next time, and I'll see you then.